debate. And there's a very famous quote by Abraham Lincoln saying we are here to congregate, consecrate, and something. You know the Gettysburg Address?
But I know that you're supposed to make not more than 3 points, otherwise it doesn't.
Exactly.
Remember.
Maybe in the break we'll play that through for a little bit. Okay. This is a bad slide, I would say.
What's it about?
Exactly, what's it about? That's why it's a bad slide. I don't think you can see it very clearly.
Yeah,
This is like fine print. Is it a bit better? You guys have the faculty, and then you have students, and eligibility criteria, and detailed information about the teachers.
I have a question. Is this presentation like something that you give to sponsor, or is it like something you use when you're doing your proper presentation?
I give this to sponsors.
Okay.
Okay.
So you like print it?
Huh?
You print it or you just give it to them?
Let's keep that for a later conversation.
Okay.
Because otherwise, yes, it's so much text on.
I will not read it if I'm a sponsor in future. I will
Yes,
not
but
read.
the companies I visit, people are paid to read these presentations.
Yes.
Seriously.
Yeah. So you have the head of the CSR department, which is a special department that pays NGOs to do stuff and make the company look more publicly appreciated. So they have to read these things so the company doesn't make a bad investment.
And this is what I think is the difference between our background, because whenever we go to sponsors, I think Karina will agree, we have to convince the person to give us money because it's good for their image.
Okay.
Well, mostly because we go to small companies, but
We don't have large
no,
companies.
we have large companies,
No.
but they're
Would be interested in our organization? No, we don't have.
that's debatable.
So if you're doing it for a debate NGO, I think you're naturally advantaged because you're debaters. Okay, so you should be better sellers than anyone else in the community. Except for maybe people who've been doing this for 30 years. Sorry for my voice, my nose is bad today. But, on the other hand, you have to innovate from this point. That's why we're talking about company research, right? How do I prepare for a meeting? You do research, essentially. What do I mean by research? First of all, you really have to understand what the company invests in. You don't just go knocking on the door and say, hey, I would like to. You have to, when you go to a meeting, you really have to know why you're going to that meeting. Okay? What the company invests in. Has it invested in other NGOs? Has it invested in community development? Has it built churches, bridges, orphanages? Has it ever invested in education before? I think I'm going to sneeze at a certain point, but it still keeps coming and going. And this is the kind of information that helps you understand the people you'll be dealing with. Okay, the next step up is that you'll be receiving a reply to your email or your phone. There's got to be a person at the other end of the line. What you can do is research about that person. Any company that respects itself will have people using LinkedIn and Facebook. What I'm saying is that when you're in a meeting, you have to find any possible way to connect with that person. So that means you'll be researching about Daniela, the head of finance for, I don't know, McCann Erickson or something, right? And you see in LinkedIn that Daniela has a huge organizational development background, but you don't just go in the start of her CV or LinkedIn CV, you go to the bottom and you look at hobbies and interests. And maybe you'll find somebody you'll find like a chapter says, hey, I've done debating, I'm interested in debating. And there's a huge connection point right there. Or maybe she's interested in lacrosse and you're a great lacrosse player. And while in the meeting you mention lacrosse. So this actually works. We actually do this. And because it helps me connect with Daniela, right? It helps me connect with something, it helps me establish a common ground between me and Daniela, which is very important. Now, this is very hard to do when you're going for like 300 companies at once, right? And this is what we'll be talking about after we finish the recruitment part. How do you recruit these people? Well, you can just establish your own recruitment process. What we do is we provide a description of this position, right? So we have join the finance team, make it look catchy, just pay for Aspire Academy, it will be you who made this possible, something like that. This is how you attract people, which is very important. The more people you have applying, the less more people you can sweat, right? And then you say, this is the job and this is what you have to do. And people will apply. The best way you can do this is with a letter of intent, for example. I use a letter of intent and a resume. And I ask them to make their resume maybe focused on fundraising. Okay. And I ask them to write in the letter of intent why they think they would be good for this, and why, for example, if they would implement new fundraising strategies, how would they see this process unfold? How would they see this process work, right? And you're not specifically looking for people, from my point of view, who have done this before. If you have people who have done this before, hire those people. But hire a few other people who have not done this before, but seem to have a good understanding of the process. Because after the people who've done this before leave, you'll still need more people to continue. And what you need is a transition. From an organizational point of view, you need a transition that moves from one generation to the next generation. That means you need people who will be there for at least 2 years. Okay? Depends on how large your cycle is. If you have a 2-year cycle, that means every year you'll be recruiting some people and some other people will be leaving. But you need some people who will be in the first year and in the second year, so they can teach the new people how it works. Okay? If you don't have this, you'll be starting from scratch every year with every event, which is very difficult to do. And even if you have like a debated society with 10 people, make sure that at least 5 of them will be there for 2 years, and recruit people that will be there for another 2 years, and so on. Any questions here? Yes, we have.
What platforms do you use for recruitment?
Well, for Aspire, I recruit internally, so therefore I use my Facebook page or my Facebook secret group, where I have 250 alumni and say, hey, this is what you can do. And for our door, I also recruit internally, but in a more, actually it's not really internally, because I put, in our door I put the job posting on my Facebook page, which is accessible to everyone. And I would like to bring more outside people into debating, for example. For me, it's very hard to work with debaters. I'm a debater myself, but I think debaters might be inherently bad at doing some organizational stuff, especially in Romania. I mean, Romanians think that, we have an issue, I can tell you, maybe you can provide me some feedback. We have a big issue, or a big issue, in our community, where we're between the organization and the community. The organization has set out to expand the debate movement. The community says, no, let's stop expanding the debate movement and let's focus on enhancing the local debate clubs, which is again contrasting with our vision of getting the debate clubs to function by themselves. Okay. And when I recruit, it's very hard for me. I find people who will be willing to join, but they're willing to join, so they reset the association towards investing in the community again, like completely investing in the community. And this is a big problem for me. And the other problem I have is that I can't really find people that can do this, because debaters in Romania, I think, are, at least high school debaters, maybe, and students, are lazy. And this is a lot of work. This is work. This is not something you fuck around with, sorry. This is actually something you really have to invest hours in. So I remember 2 years ago, I told my boss in the Spires, we have a boss, right? We have like 2 co-presidents and we're an executive committee of 5 people. And I told my co-president, one of the co-presidents, hey, I really want my birthday off. So on my board on the 22nd of May, I really want to hear nothing from anyone on that day. Just want to like sleep, watch a movie, do nothing. And of course, she called me in the morning. She said, I'm sorry, but we have a meeting today and you have to go because no one else can go. And I'm like, but it's that kind of sacrifice we're talking about if you want to make things like 60,000 euros work. That happens like in any organization. Do you have questions here? So I can move on. Can we move on? Yes. So if we look at it, the next point is finding sponsors, right? So we're talking about what kind of people you need in the team. But how do you find sponsors? How do you think you find sponsors? Or how do you evaluate sponsors? Yes,
Well, you look at other NGOs, other organizations with similar background, and you see who funded them, like in previous years.
How do you do that?
Well, usually organizations, like, or events, have at the bottom of the web page the list of the sponsors.
Okay. But if they're already funding similar organizations, why would they fund you?
Also, I did not only mention like organizations, but also I mentioned like events who happen like only once or twice, but big events, educational maybe. That shows that they are being interested in this specific domain.
So I'll ask you again.
Yeah.
Why would people sponsor you if they're already sponsoring similar organizations? You said look at the background of similar organizations, see who sponsors them. Why would they sponsor you? If they're already sponsoring another debate society?
Yeah.
Because you're cooler, that's why. But this is a good idea. If you're in the debate society, I would say look at NGOs. Look at other NGOs who are in education. Okay? Because what a sponsor can do is sponsor multiple types of education. Debate is one form of education, right? An alternative education. So you look at NGOs who sponsor education, and then you can contact them and say, hey, debate. It's wonderful. Makes people smart. Invest. And then maybe in 10 years you can recruit a debater who will be a great presenter. Stuff. What other ways can you imagine of finding sponsors? You can wait 10 seconds.
Asking for the maybe a person has to have a network of people from different backgrounds and asking them, colleagues.
Internal networking. Okay.
The first point summarizes both NGOs that have already sponsored events, or like you can, like on the basis of what kind of organization?
This is like a specific, has already sponsored an education type NGO, right?
Okay, well then you can look at like, when you see what kind of organizations sponsor education, you can look for other similar organizations that you don't know whether they sponsor or not.
I don't think the argument goes that way, because just because my company who produces engines sponsor debate doesn't mean that my rival company who produces engines will also sponsor debate. It might be an interesting perspective to go to the other company and say, hey, your rival is already sponsoring debate, maybe you should do too, so you have the same like perspective. But I think it's a really hard selling point. You can do that, but it's much easier if you look at, say, hey, these 10 companies have already sponsored education, maybe education for the blind, the poor, or the weak, maybe investing in, I don't know, Model United Nations or something, youth parliament. And these are people who already have like a tradition of sponsoring stuff. This is like the easiest access point, a tradition of sponsoring stuff, and then a tradition of sponsoring education. And then you can create a tradition of sponsoring debate. And then you have internal networking, like I said, and you ask people like, hey, we do this. We say we post it on our Facebook group and we say, hey, what companies do you have contacts to? Could you help out the fundraising team and tell us, like, do you know people there? Do you have contacts in that company? We do get maybe like 50 contacts from this in a 215 people community. What else would there be? Say Forbes 500. You know Forbes 500? You don't know Forbes 500? Forbes has a magazine coming out every year which lists the top 500 money-making companies in the world. Multinational corporations, right? And this is like an evaluation tool. You ask for different amounts of money based on the size of the company, right? So you have company size, you have like more money, something like that. If you have a company that's opened up in like 50 countries maybe and has billions of dollars in revenue, they'll probably have a bigger budget, in your country. If that company doesn't have a big presence, like small presence in your country, then it's even more interesting because if it's a multinational corporation with a small presence, they'll want to invest in the local community to raise awareness. So it's much easier to get money from them than from other companies who have been traditionally in the space for like 20 years. For like Petrom in Romania has been in Romania for over like 20 years. And it's very hard to get money from Petrom because they're already investing in education for the past 10 years, right? You have Forbes, and then you have theft, I would say. In a way. You work in other organizations, yes. Does that organization have a database? Yes, steal it. I'm not being in any way... I don't feel morally prejudiced saying this, because in management, like saying, when you manage, you need a database, right? Because all this information has to go somewhere. And has to be used by the next generation after you leave the debate society. And they can just open a spreadsheet and say, hey, these people have already sponsored us. These people have already contacted us. And these are the new contacts we have this year. Use that database and use these tools to find the necessary information. Now, finding sponsors has also a very rough skin sort of thing, but besides rough skin, I would also say thick skin, if you know the play on words in English, because I, for example, write to people on LinkedIn and Facebook. Okay? Because the main purpose you have when contacting a sponsor is never, ever talking to the secretary. Ever. The main point is that you have to find the key decision maker, okay? You have to find that person that will actually decide whether they will give you money or not. This might be the head of the department, this might be of marketing, this might be the head of the CSR department, this might be someone else. The person actually signs off on your project. Now, there are multiple ways to do this. You can go through the secretary, because there is no other way to contact them. But you have to know who this person is. Okay, you really have to know. You Google it, you ask who is the current marketing director for Google, and you contact him. Now you can try reaching his secretary. You can use LinkedIn or even Facebook and actually write him a personal message. Hey, hi, I would like to connect with you, connect with him, and after he connects with you, then start maybe, hey, can we please have a meeting? Can I present the project? Call him and have a 1-minute elevator pitch on the phone with him. Hi, my name is, I'm calling you because I'd like to set up a meeting for. Okay. And then you have emails. And emails is like fishing. Has anyone fished before? Have you all fished before? Okay. Why is it like fishing? You raise your hand.
Well, in fishing, you throw and you wait if somebody will
Exactly.
eat it.
This is like dynamite fishing, okay? It's not like rod fishing. Because you will send out 300 emails in one shot, and you will send all these emails and wait to see who replies. And we were telling you before that doing all the research on the companies is difficult. So if you have like a 300 list company, it's very difficult to research on it. So you shoot out these emails, and you only research the companies who agree to a meeting. Okay? Why? You save time, you save money. On the other hand, this is a very interesting perspective. Here are some tips and tricks. When you write an email, never do the following. A, ask for money. B, never send a presentation. And C, never give up. How does this work? So you have the background team doing all your research. The backend team can also send all these emails. And the motivation for them functions in the same way it does for the front end team, because they might not